Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you didn't look at this and go, beating a dead horse again, more number talks. But yes, this is best practice and we do need to advance our knowledge on it. I have additional resources for you to pick up on the back table. If you've got a teaching partner who's not here, pick up a copy for them, that's no problem. What I want us to do next with our number talks is to figure out the best way to pose the problems based on where my students are now. How do I know where my students are now? Well, we've got a lot of new data coming in with our fast math. So we're going to use that data to work a little bit with it and to help us make some smart choices about it. And, you know, as we look at the standards, one group of standards says we're supposed to add and subtract to 20, then the next one says add and subtract to 100, but nobody tells you how are you supposed to get them from 20 to 100. They don't tell you what number choices to make. They don't make good sense of those kind of things. Or they say that we need to build on our knowledge of fraction multiplication to get to division, but they don't tell you how to do that. So I'm going to have ideas in here. I want to get through all this stuff hopefully by about 4:20, and then if you have your computers, then you can maybe hop on to the FastBridge and look at your A math report and specifically look at those developing skills, because that is where I think we're going to make the most impact for our learners. So that's my overview for today. You got questions for me before I begin? No, just feels good to sit for just a minute. Okay, I get it. All right, so let's just do a quick review of what a number talk is. You had this book going around. You may have some here in your library. You may have borrowed them. But just a quick review of what a number talk is. We know it's not supposed to take any more than 15 minutes. 5 is the least amount, so 5 to 15 minutes is what we need to do. And when you're doing those, you have purposefully selected the problems, all right? You pose the problem, you are quiet with wait time, you ask students to do it mentally, then you ask for students to give answers where you use your best drama skills and you're not trying to show yay or nay to any of the answers, you just gather the answers. Then you ask for students to defend their work and you ask for multiple ways to arrive at the answer, and your job is to scribe the answers to try to make sense of their thinking, and to always check with the child, is this how you thought? Did I record your thinking the way you thought? It's really challenging for us to do that because we're never quite sure where the kid's going with their thinking to be able to write it down succinctly. So that's always the challenge. That's a good review. You're okay with that? Okay. Just as a quick reference, has anyone done a number talk in the past 2 weeks? I got a majority of you have done at least one number talk since the 1st of December, maybe? Sweet. Okay. Did you, in your recent PLC work, do anything with smarter balanced assessments? Have you taken a look at those? Yes. Okay. My opinion is the smarter balanced assessments require students to do a lot of explaining of their thinking. Kids can't explain in writing what they're thinking unless they can say it. They're not comfortable saying it unless we give them multiple opportunities to practice. This is the best, easiest way to get them to practice it. So if I want them to be able to verbalize their thinking and then take it into writing, I need to practice with it. And our textbooks don't always allow for a lot of that kind of thing. So this is a good way to do it. It helps us to build our computational fluency with the mental math, allows for sense making and use of multiple models, opportunities to reason with numbers, opportunities to make convincing arguments. In other words, it helps us to do these, our standards of mathematical practice. It really is a great vehicle for that. Now, you've got a handout with this on it. It's really blurry on my screen, but you've got a handout. So these are additional items put out by Dan Meyer. Dan Meyer is the guy who is most known for his 3-act math tasks, and also for creating higher order thinking on the Desmos if you are a grades 4 through advanced math teacher. So I wanted to bring those to your attention. I'm not going to read them to you now. I just have them for you so you have additional ideas of why we want to use a number talk This is the second part of that first page, what students learn. Students learn flexibility. They need to know that there is more than one way to see the math, to work it out, and that a problem can be solved easily one way, or I could take a lot of laborious steps and solve it another, and I've got to find the most efficient way for my brain. So they're going to use the flexibility. They're going to have a lot of time composing and decomposing numbers, and that is crucial for them to be able to work with the decimals, with the fractions, with two-digit and higher numbers. That decomposing is very, very essential. They also are going to be able to find errors in thinking, defend their thinking, and know why they went astray if they got the wrong answer. So, when I'm doing a number talk, I better be doing in my teacher mode a lot of advanced planning for what's going on. So I gave you a form, a handout that has, it's double-sided. It has a planning template on one side and the other. They are both equally effective, just what everyone likes your learning style. See if I can get one in my hand here. The one you're seeing here is on the front side. Pardon me. And there is an additional template on the back, depending on what your learning style is. Now, I'm not asking you to fill these out and write those down for every single number talk you do. I'd never do one if I had to do that much recording. I don't have that kind of time, and neither do you. But what I do want you to do is to think about the categories that they're asking here, and to be able to have that in your mind, so you are trying to get this efficiently done with your students in those 5 to 15 minutes. You don't want to waste a minute trying to think of the questions for when a student is going to take up on a tangent that you need to correct. If you've pre-planned, if you've anticipated what they might do, then you have a thought ahead of time to get it done. And so I'm bringing you this just as a resource. This is the piece that makes me take the most time. Think through how a student's going to solve it and how I'm going to record it. We need to be really careful with the equal sign. I see a lot of teachers recording these run-on equal sign, like 10 minus 7 equals 3 plus 4 equals, you know, those kind of things, and they get a sentence that no longer makes mathematical sense. So you have to make sure that when you're crafting that, you can use arrow notation to get to the next thought. So maybe I'm going 10 minus 7 equals 3, arrow, 3 plus 1, that kind of thing, so they know that this is the next kind of thinking I'm doing. So be careful with your recording. So I'm just bringing that to you as a resource, and that's the other template. This one I like because it has academic language. When you're doing your terms, your word gathering, your students may call it a variety of things. We want to make sure we get to the vocabulary of the IEL core. So if you're working on something and the student is saying their words, you can re-voice their words using the correct academic language. So if we need to work with factors, or we need to work with add-ins, or the word sum, whatever we're working with, you make sure you've got that in there. And this is just a good idea to have that as a reference point. Any questions on the templates? Okay. Getting kids to respond more than procedurally how they did it into justifying why it works. There's this fine line distinction between it. A student can usually go through the mathematical procedure and tell you what they did, but justifying why it works is different. For example, the child may see 2 plus 2 equals 4. Well, how do you know? Well, if you see the child going 2 and an add sign and 2 and lining it up vertically and 4, that's a memorized procedure. To justify it, if the student's making 4 pictures of a counter and counting 1, 2, 3, 4, that's justifying their thinking. Or if they can say 2 and another 2 makes 4 and they can point to them in the one-to-one coordinate correspondence, that's justifying. So that's going to help us there. To help them get there, there's some discussion ideas. And yes, you have this as a handout. It's 4 parts. So to get the conversation started, if nobody wants to share, they maybe have to have a little bit of confidence sharing with just a shoulder partner first. So here's some ideas of turn and talk to a partner. When you're revoicing what you are listening to, you need to make it so the child has an opportunity to listen carefully to you. Did I say what you were thinking correctly? So here's some revoicing ideas. And if you need them to elaborate on their thinking, here's some sentence stems to get you started. If you want students to be thinking about someone else's explanation, you might have them turn around and repeat it. Can you say it in your own words? Can you tell me what your partner said? Give them an opportunity to put it deeper in their brains by them repeating it. I skipped that step way too often and didn't see the value in it when I had students up there. But this 20 seconds worth of time is really important, because if you hear it, then you have to say it. You're giving yourself another opportunity to process it. All right? To help them deepen their reasoning, here is all sorts of sentence stems that you can ask ideas to get them to reason about their thinking, as well as the turn and talk and repeating it. And there's one more step, step 4. When someone offers an explanation, you can ask others to think about that and reason about it. And here's some sentence stems to get you going with that. Is there anything more you can say about it? And there's offering them the ability to agree or disagree. If I have sentence stems in my pocket, it just saves me time thinking on the fly. That's why I gave you that handout. Now, I'm not going to ask you to read this article in this time. When you meet together as another math group, a PLC, maybe you can spend 15 minutes reading it. But I wanted to bring this latest research to you. This article is talking about meaningful classroom discussions, and it talks about, I believe, a 4th grade classroom teacher. And this classroom teacher, as she's trying to get her students to work and discuss things, either in number talks or general math conversations, the collaboration piece, she has 5 strategies that she enumerates in that article, and how she asks her students to move to them to get them from blurting out answers and yelling over one another and disagreeing in not so kind ways to having a classroom that actually works. And I thought it was a very informative article. And so I'm just telling you that you need the discussion part of math, but if you don't have ideas of how to get there, you've got sentence stems to give you ideas to question. But if your students aren't responding the way you want, there's an article that's going to help you. I don't intend for you to read it today. That's a put it aside and you've got it for later. Okay? Okay, so let's get to the, pardon me, let's get to the choice of numbers. The selection, how do I move them? And I'm going to be trying to get all sorts of levels here, so I'm going to start very easily with counting and cardinality, but I'm going to have to plan so I can move my number talk up. I'm going to start where everybody can come in, this low floor, and I'm going to move it up and push them. So these are just some ideas. Look over here to the dots to begin with. Compare this first column. What are you noticing?
Well, from the first one to the second one, you added a dot.
Okay, so I've got one more.
You rearranged
Yeah, I rearranged them so I can see 4 in a different way.
You added a dot.
And then I added another dot. So what do you see for line for this one? And students can either tell me I see 3 because I'm counting a 1, 2, 3. I see 2 and 1 more. It reminds me of what I see when I roll the dice. Those kind of items. All right. Let's move to the second column. What is the display? 10 frames. I'm working 10 frames. So I have basically 2 problems here. Here's the first problem, and here's the second problem. Can you tell me the difference between the 2 of them? Do they both add to 10? Mm-hmm. Yes. So, do they both have a full 5? So they've got the fast 5 to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Fast 5. Can I make another group of 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
Both of them.
I have a fast 5. Can I make another group of 5? Okay. Does it matter that they are off balanced? No. So I'm adding 2, then I'm adding 4. Go to the numbers. 2 plus 2, 2 plus 3, 3 plus 3, 3 plus 4. Okay, building on some basic facts, right? The same way as subtraction, using my landmark or friendly numbers first, and then changing it up by 1. Also using a landmark number, changing it by 1. Okay, let's take a look. This might be, I'm going to have a series of 3 questions that I might pose for a number talk. So this might be my question, how many frogs, and I might flash up that picture. And obviously I'm looking for the answer if there are 4 frogs, correct? But look at how I'm anticipating as I'm planning along how my students might get there. They might count 1 by 1, and this is what I'm going to be recording. 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 4. I might use a number line, but I'm going to be doing that. Maybe a child can say, well, I know there's 3, because they can just look at it and they can recognize 3 and 1 more. So maybe I'm going to record it like that. Or maybe they're saying, well, it would be 5 except there's a hole, so it can't be 5, I'm 1 less, and subtract it off. So I'm planning and anticipating what my students are going to say. Does that kind of give you a feel for what I'm doing when I talk about that? So maybe the next day, I move them to this. And I ask, how many dots? And yes, they're color-coded. I'm trying to give them something to put their thinking on. So I still may have the students who are counting 1 by 1. Hopefully I can have them supersize 4 and add 1 more. Or maybe they can just recognize it's 5 because that looks like something that they play games, they can see it on dice.
Or
Right?
domino.
Or dominoes, absolutely, on dominoes. And then I'm going to maybe pull this on them because I want to reach all my learners. So my struggling students maybe are really going to be stuck counting 1 by 1 on this, which they're going to probably get messed up because it's going to take a long time to get to 14 and they'll forget. But hopefully I can see patterns. So as I'm anticipating this, I could say, well, maybe they can see patterns of 3 plus 2 more. Maybe they can see patterns of 6 plus 2 more. Maybe they see pattern of 4, pattern of 4, pattern of 3, pattern of 3, trying to anticipate all the ways to write them down. Okay, so what if I'm working with addition? Maybe I'm just putting this raw problem up, 8 plus 7, thinking it through. Well, doubles plus 1, doubles minus 1, make a 10. So if I'm trying to make a 10, I can take 2 off of here, make a 10 and add 5 more. I can take 3 off of here and add 5 more, those versions. Maybe I want to jump to 2 digits. Ideas, making 10s, adding the 10s, then adding the 1s, compensating. Maybe I've got a student who says, well, this is close to 30. I can add 18 on and then subtract off those extras I put onto it. And the last one, 27 and add 10. Well, that's going to give me 37. 37 up to my next landmark number be 40. I'd have to have 3 more to get to 40. And then finally add my last 5. When I get my problems more complicated, I have to think of how are my students going to solve it. All right? They don't always have to be raw problems. It can be something really abstract. What do you know about 15? Okay, I'm going to throw it out to you. What do you know about 15?
3 5s.
3 5s. Give me more.
It's divisible by 5.
Divisible by 5?
10 plus 5.
10 plus 5?
Composite number.
Composite number.
A dime and a nickel.
A dime and a nickel. It's a teen number. I write it with a 1 followed by a 5, not a 5 followed by a 1. So I can ask all kinds of things, and maybe when I'm writing things down, I want to think about making an anchor chart if the learning is valuable so students can refer to that later. So in this one, what do we know about 15? Writing it at 1-5, order matters. It's not a 51. I can count to 15 by 1s, and I've indicated what the number line with the last might look like. It could be an age. It could be a money. It is a teen number. I can have a 15 frame, a group of 10 and 5 more. I can have a 20 frame with a 5 missing. All sorts of things. So now, if I've had students talking about that, maybe I want to follow up with their learning. Give them a different number. So maybe I'm asking them to do a journal entry, an exit ticket, a piece of homework, writing for quiet time, and you're going to find out what they know about a number. Now, they don't all have to have the same number because we know students in our classes don't have the same learning. So maybe I've got a couple working on 21s, but maybe I've got a student who's not ready for it yet. So I can give them all the same kind of thinking with different numbers. So a number talk can lead to an informal assessment. All right, see if they're putting that on there. How many of you are using a number talk followed up by any kind of an assessment to see if they're getting the learning?
I've been using the Seesaw app to do, like, not necessarily just with the number talks, but something that I've taught and then they have to show me through
Yes.
Seesaw. So I like something like that would be perfect because they can record on there and then they just send it to me and I approve it.
Wonderful.
So
Continue that.
Yeah.
The rest of us, let's see if we can consider putting follow up.
Like,
That-
even
they
like-
see it and what's the seesaw stand for? Seeing and
Seesaw,
saw, or
it's
is
an
it-
app that you use on the iPads.
Mhm.
And I think it's a computer based, I don't remember.
A
I think
screen
you can
casting
do it.
kind of one too.
Yeah, like they can take a picture of something and then draw on it, or they can record themselves. Like when we've done a math center, when they're done, then they have to take a picture of what they created in that center and then explain to their parents what they did that day.
Nice.
And like for one of them, there were 3 centers using subtraction. One group was doing an addition activity. Well, they explained how they were subtracting. And I said, I want you to listen to this. Were you subtracting? Oh, no. And so we talked about you have to be able to explain what you're doing.
Nice.
So that went. And it's hard for them. First graders, it's really hard for them to explain what they've done.
And if we don't give them opportunities to practice that, they're going to be juniors and it's going to be hard for them to explain what they've done. We need to start asking our kids to think about that. Okay, how about this? Do you ask them any, is it true? To compare side by side. All right, my 10 frames, is it true? Yes? How do you know?
You move your-
Okay, so if I'm asking a student to do it, they may say, well, I'm taking this one off of this 10 frame, I'm putting it on here, and I know that makes 10. Over here, I'm too short, and I have 2 more, it will still make 10. 10 is the same number on both sides of my equation, and so you can give them more. Now, not all the ones I would not do them string after string, I'm just giving you ideas, bunching it up. But you can ask those kind of things. Have you thought about putting those in your number talks? Okay. All right. Let's work on the first grade one. In the operational thinking, algebraic thinking, represent and solve problems involving addition and subtraction. Now this is a blank problem that I have several number choices that I could put in. So maybe I want to use this Horton question 5 days. And every day I'm going to change up my numbers. All right, so let's talk about this first set of numbers using 10 and 3. Horton sat on 10 eggs. 3 eggs hatched. How many eggs did not hatch? Okay, so 10 and 3, I'm working in my under 10s, correct? They can visual 10 frames, hopefully they're gonna get 7. The next day, I may bump them up. I'm no longer working under 10s, but I'm not having to do any borrowing from another 10s place and regroup anything. I'm not going to have to decompose that stuff. Moving up higher. Oh, I don't have nice numbers ending in 0 anymore. And finally, I'm going to have to do some real decomposing here because I'm not going to be able to, in the positive world, take 8 things from 4 things. They're going to have to go negative or they're going to have to regroup. So you can use the same problem with different number choices. Down below, my book has blank pages. I have read blank pages. How many more pages do I need to read? Again, take a look at your number choices. Have you thought about putting a problem of the week on with different number selections in there? Okay. You don't have to make your number talk problem selection difficult day after day after day. Second grade, if it's working on place value. So our number base 10 is understand place value. So Annie has blank marbles in a jar. Grace has blank marbles in a jar. How many marbles do Annie and Grace have? Take a look at my number combinations. Barely over 100. Midway between 100 and 200. Going to have to regroup a couple of places. Getting over 500. Over 500. That last one, really going to push them to get to that 1,000. So you can move them up. And maybe you want to follow this kind of thinking up with a journal entry. Write a number sentence for each pair of numbers comparing Annie's marbles to Grace's marbles using less than, greater than, or equals. And so then maybe I've given them the number choices and they're going to have to write a number sentence that tells me something about them. All right? So you can be sneaky with the comparative. Associative property is something that should be our students' friend, to move things around, to regroup them. All right, so here's, I'm talking about squirrels because I saw cute squirrel pictures on the news, you know, that kind of news feature. Brown squirrel collected blank acorns on Monday, blank acorns on Tuesday, and blank acorns on Wednesday. How many acorns did brown squirrel collect for winter? And there's my number choices. Now in the first set, it's okay that 3 and 7 work together to make a 10 and a 4. In the second set, what do you think I want them to do?
Doubles.
Put the 4s together and double them up. How about third set? Doubles, but now I want to put the doubles back here and work these together, correct? And make it 10 on the last one. Another way to do it is just a higher level, just another number problem with a whole group of numbers, and I'm asking which class made more. So the kids are in 2 different classrooms, and I'm trying to mess with the students' thinking, because those people who just pull out raw numbers are going to pull out 108 and room 114, which those numbers are not in the problem. So you're going to get those kids identified who are just number pluckers. So give those kind of problems to them so you can identify those students who are just looking at the problem going, okay, she's going to ask me to add, so I'm just grabbing every number, and you'll know. Okay, so then you know someone's going to have some, take an idea and slow down and read. Don't forget to make sure you're talking landmark and friendly numbers, connecting things to 5s, 10s, 50s, 100s, 25 sometimes. So if I have the number problem of 9 times 25, expect them to connect to 10 times 25. And think about those sequences down at the bottom. Look at the left-hand column first. Look at how big I jumped from 6 times 50 to 6 times 300. And then finally 6 times 349. Now, if I'm expecting this to be probably, I'd say, 5th grade number talk practice, because I'm supposed to have really good number sense for multiplication working in 5th grade. This should be easy doable for them. This should make them have to do a little bit of brain sweats, but I should be able to get these 2 problems on the board to be able to make sense, the last one. If I know 6 times 50, given number, 6 times 300, given number, I should be able to do some reasoning of 6 times 349 by using my information from those 2 problems.
Is it wrong to use a basic fact and add zeros?
Do they know why they're adding zeros?
Well, we've talked about
if the student can tell you why adding zeros is sensible, I'm for it.
Okay.
If the student says that's the rule my teacher taught me, I'm not for it.
Okay.
They've got to know why.
Okay.
In moving that I'm really working with this number who I'm just thinking of in the tens place, calling it a 5, and I'm going to add my times 10 later.
Right.
If they can multiply those ways, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
But if they just say that's the rule, I'm not okay with that because I don't know what that rule means. Okay, let's work a little higher. So if my problem is 5 and 5/10 times 12, you know, think about them breaking that apart as to a 5 and the 5/10 and working with the sequences that way. So they can break that into add-ins and work that way with fractions and decimals and give them practice doing this. Especially when it comes to these kind of things, students aren't used to putting those pieces together. These are my favorite. Students don't really use halving and doubling. It wasn't a strategy that most textbooks used. So if you're thinking 8/10 times 1 and 2/10, what might be an easy way for a number to be halved and a number to be doubled? What makes sense to you? What would you do with this first one? Would you have the 8 and double the 1 2/10? Or would you have the 1 2/10 and double the 8?
I would have the 8 and double the 1 2/10.
All right, because
Then you'd be multiplying 4 times 24.
a smaller number,
Yeah.
right? Okay, a smaller number. And could that student even go even farther and say 4/10 times 2 and 4/10? Could they even go 2 times 4 and 8/10? They can have and double again?
Yeah.
Yes, it works. So for those kids who understand counting by twos, then multiplying by twos, the halves and doubling is a really big idea. Jumping up to this one, odd and even. You don't want to probably have an odd number. Doesn't work quite so nicely. So I'm going to have them think about those combinations. So this has been evens, evens. Now I've got combinations of odd numbers and evens. How about over here, talking about having and doubling? What are you going to do with 7 and 1/4 times 4?
Double 7 and 1/4.
Which would be
14 and
14 and 2/4 or 14 and a half, depends on what the student's thinking is. And this would jump down to 2. So then could I just maybe think about doubling that in my head? That's the idea. Changing the fractions. This one gets interesting. What are you going to do with this? What would your students do with it? Okay, let's talk about
I would
doubling.
do a distributive property first, maybe.
16 and then do 16 times 4.
They double which?
If you double 16.
Okay.
And then do 16 times 1/4. So what's 1/4 of 16?
Okay.
But I don't know how much they would know double.
Well, I'm going to suggest, can I do 16 and 1/4 doubled? That'd be 32 and a half. Can I do 32 and a half doubled? Would that be 65? So it was 2 rounds. Half that for 8, half that for 4. Suddenly I've got 2 whole numbers. Students can manipulate that a little easier in their head. Don't be afraid to give them those harder sequences. Have you thought about giving them more or less? 3 9400ths plus 6 8300ths. I don't want the sum. I want to know if it's more than 10 or less than 10. And have them justify it. You'll get an idea of place value. And there's various ideas there. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Don't forget to use that kind of thinking in your number talks.
Are you going to send these slides to us?
I can.
Okay.
Okay, good.
I'll send
I'm trying to write them down.
Ah.
I'm not getting very far.
it.
Understandable.
Think about scaffolding. Remember, I keep talking about low floor, high ceiling. I want everyone to begin to have the understanding and to move it up. So if I'm supposed to be working in my 5th grade standard number and fractions, apply and extend previous understandings of multiplication, division to multiply and divide fractions, if that's my standard I'm working on, are there any fractions in my first scenario? No, purposefully. Frank baked 3 pans of brownies. He cut 6 brownies in each pan. How many brownies did he make? I want to understand, can they just multiply first? Whole numbers. Now, in the second problem, I have a whole number and I have 1 fraction. So I'm starting to scaffold my thinking. And in this last number, I finally have 2 fractions. So don't forget that you can start where everybody can achieve it and get comfortable with, oh yes, this is how multiplication is working, I've got that going, and how do I change it when I get a fraction? And when I'm multiplying by a fraction, why is my product smaller than if I multiply by a whole number? Get those conversations going out. Folks, your power in number talks. This is a quote from Kathy Richardson. She's on Math Perspectives, and it's great. The power in the number talks comes from inspiring each child to think and make sense of the mathematics they are presented. They are never trying to figure out what the teacher wants. Rather, they are totally engaged in their own sense-making process. A number talk is an opportunity for children to learn that they can figure things out for themselves in the way that makes sense to them. That's the true meaning of a lifelong learner. So when you're posing your number talks, I want you to base it on data. what does the data tell us our students are developing? And the way that I found the most useful information, that was on the AMAP screening report. And you can look for each student if you want to see where a common sense is. What's the skill that they are developing? And base your number talks off those. You can also look at upcoming lessons. What are foundational skills those students need to be successful, and what's coming up next? Put those in your number talks. Build that, front load that success for them. What questions do you have? I was pretty good for my 420, wasn't I? Okay, well, I'm going to give you time to look at your FAST data or upcoming lessons. And again, number talks is a best practice in light of our possibly upcoming Smarter Balanced. I think it's extremely likely, but I will never second guess our government. I really do need students to have practice in thinking aloud so that they can write things down. In your number talks, if you have not had a written formal follow-up activity, let's start sneaking a few of those in there. To get from thinking, to speaking, to writing, so I can see what my students are learning. Okay, thank you.
And if you need a refresher with the Number Talks book, I know I have at least one copy. I'm not quite sure where the other 2 copies are, but you know, we still have those resources available too. And then we also purchased that.
The next one, the Ruth Parker one?
Yeah.
The Ruth Parker one is geared for starting with grade level 4, and it goes up through high school. And there are wonderful ideas, and they do start underneath 4th grade. So there is still ideas, and she gives ideas of problems to pose in there. So if that book's roaming around, there are number choice
Actually,
ideas in there.
we purchased for, I think there was one for each grade level that we purchased.
If you have been, yes, Amanda's got that book right there. If you have been following that Number Talks book, Making Number Talks Matter, has a global book study online happening right now. And it has a hashtag of
this
book
or the
one Amanda's holding, of MNTMTCH, Making Number Talks Matter Teach. So if you use the hashtag and you go onto Twitter, you can find huge discussions of every single chapter in that book. It's fabulous. They're in chapter 11 right now. It's been going on for about 3 months. And if you want resources, the person leading that is a Teach Laureate from the Teaching Channel, Kristen Gray, and she's made s'mores, and she's got people with snapshots of classroom posters and discussions on them, and I have links to those for you.
And then we did start that Google Doc for you.
Yes, thank you.
And I've also, have you ever heard anything about Curriculum Associates?
Yes.
And I'm not going to be able to remember the name of their program. That came recommended to me. I talked to somebody over the summer. Anyway, I talked to the representative, and they're going to send us some samples.
Okay. The reason that Google Doc, I really want you to put in, I glanced at it briefly. What print materials are you using? Okay, you may be using Hodgepodge. That's okay, tell me what your Hodgepodge is.
Oh.
And what digital resources are you using? I know some of you do have the STMath, some of you are using the apps. Can you give me a feel for them? I know it's going to be kind of a pain to write down, well, I'm using all 30 of these, so here's my iPad, and I type it in and swipe and type it in. But it does help me to know, because if we can give you materials that would advance your student learning, that makes it easier for you as a teacher to make sure I'm covering the core with fidelity, to do the concrete, the representational, the abstract thinking, that's what we need to do. And if you've already got things you're using, well, we can advance that thinking. And if we don't have them, we need to get those in your hands, because we have to make sure we're not having gaps in the students' learning.
I will say I use almost every app you showed us last year.
Sweet. I need to tell you, well, I think Amber put it on there. I have been working on putting everything in a Weebly. I think Amber sent that to you. But I keep adding to this thing all the time. So I have a website called, I know it's real creative, royermath.weebly.com. but I keep adding in tons of information, so I have a lot of supertizing and place values, some resources, and in those apps that you said I was putting in, I have added two. There's dot cards if you need dot cards, and there's all sorts
It's
of
not showing it for some reason, Diane.
You're not seeing it?
No.
Well, isn't that interesting? Why did you see it just a second ago?
Might have
You
to
might
get,
be off of the
It just might not be.
connection.
Well,
no, it'd be.
I'm on the internet.
It would be blue.
Did I come undone?
We see that, but we don't see
Okay,
your.
let's
Are
see
you
if we
still in
can,
your,
let's see if we can do some different,
how do you spell Weebly?
W-E-E-B-L-Y. Let's see if we can do some magic here.
There you go.
Do we look better now?
Yeah.
Okay,
There we go.
so, all right, so let me go back to where I was, so it makes sense to you. I have a webpage called royermath.weebly.com, and it has tabs across the top. So in apps and links, I have an updated piece on there. Greg Tang has some new fabulous ones out, and there's other ones I've put on there. And under resources, a lot of the things that I'm showing you today, if you were thinking I have to go clear back to visual ideas and you needed the dot cards, it will load back up in a second. This is the download, you can get it, but if you want to say, what does it look like before I download it, I tried to give you a feel for what that would look like. But there is a variety of resources. If you're looking for Math Talk prompts, I've got posters. If you need to have students have an anchor chart, what to look like, I've got posters, ideas, and things there. There's the templates I shared with you, all sorts of different pieces in that. If you're into subitizing and my early learners, I do have some games. It's thinking about it. The internet's thinking slowly. Okay, there's ideas there for you. So I believe Amber put that out for you to go, but I'm adding to that more than weekly. All right, as I find something, I'm putting them in there. Thanks very much for your time. When I see you in January, I want to talk about that Google Doc that you're all filling out and what some resources that we can keep the learning ratcheted up for you guys. Keep doing number talks. In the crazy holiday schedule, when there might not be time for a full math lesson, there is time for a number talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Diane. If you want to grab your posters on your way out.
I don't know where I'm looking for.
I have